Our role as individuals is to come together to form a collective. The word for collective in Arabic is ummah. Ummah is a word we throw around a lot, but we only use it to mean some emotional tie.
How do we stay positive with this? How do we move forward with showing people that our presence is actually important here? Perhaps we are the means, in fact, we are the means of barakah for this land.
Families are breaking down, white individuals over the collective. The mother and father, they think about themselves, and the sacrifice, the children. I don't love him anymore, I want to go my own way. I don't love her anymore, I want to go my own way. What about the children? No, I deserve to live a happy life.
I would engage with educated English folk, and a lot of educated English people around. And I just give three examples. I would reference some of the leading luminaries, the greatest lights of Western civilization, or British civilization. Adam Smith, the great Scottish economist and historian, he wrote very eloquently in appreciation of Islamic governance, actually, in the Ottoman Empire at that time. He admired it. Reading a short extract from a book by Tim Winter, otherwise known as Abdul Hakim Murad. I'm sure most of you have heard of him. He's a Muslim convert, a professor at Cambridge University. He's written this marvellous book called Travelling Home, Essays on Islam in Europe. And I do really recommend this book if you want some solid intellectual meat after today's event, so to think about these issues at a deeper level even. This book is absolutely superb. And if I may, I just want to read a paragraph from this. It's written in Tim Winter's inimitable style. It's very condensed, it's very eloquent. One needs to focus to get it. But it addresses a question, a very fundamental question, particularly the nationalist right, which are resurgent at the moment. Tommy Robinson holding his ridiculous carol thing in London yesterday, which has offended all the mainstream churches because it's racist and Islamophobic and everything else. But anyway, this passage we're going to read to you addresses this question which they put to us as Muslims. Do we belong here? Do we belong in Europe? Because it's a fundamental question that has been put into doubt, whether or not we have a home here. And I think Tim Winter, as I say in his amazing style, addresses this question head on. And I want to share with you what he says. He writes, Muslims find themselves at home everywhere. For the universalism of Islam enables a local rooting which recognizes that wheresoever you may turn, there is God's face. It's Quran 3:115, of course. Such is this Muslim sense of belonging that believers feel more at home in a place than an atheist could, since to lose contact with God is immediately to forfeit one's sense of connection to a place of his making. It is to feel one's roots and identity shrivel. There can be no truly English, German, or Russian atheist. From this kind of Muslim perspective, Lenin was not Russian. Douglas Murray is not British. And Sam Harris is not American. They seem to wait in a forlorn foreign encampment, even when officially at home. By contrast, to become Muslim or to arrive from an Islamically Abrahamic place and to maintain that traditional sensibility which perceives God's signs superabundantly everywhere, is immediately to see the land with understanding, and hence to begin to grow roots and to adorn and engage the earth. Such, very roughly, is the Islamic theory of Abrahamic mobility. Unlike Israel's wanderings in exile, which await the messianic intervention, which will take the people to a home greater than all homes, Muslims travel from one home to an equal other, and do not cherish a return to the mother of cities, except as visitors. They migrate Abrahamically, But every country for them is a promised land. End quote. Extraordinary words, extraordinary theology, extraordinary understanding of our place as people who submit to God. This is God's world, it's God's country. And we recognize his signs superabundantly everywhere, as Tim Winter says. So we have a belonging here, in a way, and an atheist, those who really attack Islam from their oh so superior attitude, people like Douglas Murray, who get up one's nose, I must say. But these people do not truly belong because they don't recognize the reality of the world around them. They're dispossessed through their own ideology. Isn't that interesting? So I just thought I'd share those comforting and theological words that we truly belong, because this is God's world and we are his people, alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. What a great reference to have, Sheikh Timothy Winters, Sheikh Abdul Hakim. I wonder if Dr. Sahel, we can follow on from that with the thought that we are a moral and spiritual presence here in this country, and that we're already at home. Could you explore that from your perspective, please? Paul said we're not a pressure group. We are a moral and spiritual presence. Are we being that presence?
Thank you very much. What I wanted to stress in my comment was that as individuals, we are on our individual journeys. But the sacred law of Islam is at its core a communal code. If you want to think of a metaphor of what the Prophet brought, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of the sacred law is a metaphor. But if you look at one of its aspects, just on YouTube, not now because you get distracted, but if you just go to type Mecca live, unless you're going to catch the Kaaba in one of the 5 prayers, what you'll see is just a sea of people walking. And the sea never stops and never dies, by day and by night. And every speck on that sea is only there for 7 rounds. So it's quite a remarkable thing. And when you look at it, you're not actually noticing the individual story. You're noticing this collective movement. The whole or the sum is far greater and more significant and more catching to your eye than the sum of the parts. Our role as individuals is to come together to form a collective. The word for collective in Arabic is ummah. Ummah is a word we throw around a lot, but we only use it to mean some emotional tie. Ummah is not merely an emotional tie, because in Arabic, ummah has 3 ingredients to the word. One is it's a large collective. The other is that it's gathered for some purpose or some mission or some responsibility, from the root amma, which means to intend. And one is that it has some structure or some leadership, from the word imam, which is to lead. And so the sacred law of Islam teaches us how to come together to form an orderly collective for a greater responsibility. As individuals, we will always have our faults. But as a collective, we cover each other's faults. As a collective, we represent our Prophet, God bless him and give him peace. It's a remarkable part of our theology that if all the Muslims on the world were to say something is right, it's definitely right. It's like a revelation. In sacred law, we call this ijma' or consensus. As we form the collective, we do represent the Prophet who was sent to these lands. That Prophet who was sent to these lands, imagine what he would be in a land where there's so much child poverty, people left on the streets, families broken. What would he be? He would be a shelter for these people. He would be a mercy. He would be a voice of justice. We have to be that voice, and we can only do it as a collective. That's why when our Prophet said, God bless him and give him peace, Islam is built upon 5. These were the foundations of building ummah. Ummah is a thing you build by working together in the place where you live. And by place, I don't mean United Kingdom. By place, I mean Bradford, Birmingham, East London. The sacred law is very place-based. The mosque is a place. We should have spaces we can gather and remind each other. Zakat is a place-based duty. All of our classical schools of law, they either only say making zakat place-based. They call it either fard or sunnah. but they all felt it was the essential duty. So as a pillar of your faith, you might be from another country ethnically, but as a pillar of your faith, you have to find out very quickly who are the Muslims where I live, what are their needs, how do we suit their needs. You create a leadership, you move wealth, you create due diligence, you create structures, you start organizing. All of the standards of the sacred law are creating this collective. I'll just stop on that point. Now, what does the country need? I said a lot of the public institutions are failing people. Nothing is, I don't believe, is going to save this country. And now I'm using everyone's language because everyone feels something is crumbling here. Nothing is going to catch that gap except communities taking responsibility for their own. We as Muslims have to represent that. Because our sacred law, all of it is founded in that. We have forgotten some of that. We are in the inertia of movement and diaspora living, and we're in this inertia of finding our feet. We have to find our feet with our Prophet. God bless him and give him peace. And it's a very clear roadmap of structured, orderly community, community welfare, community services, community leadership. That's the thing which can partner with local governments and say, oh, we are looking after our own. We have systems. So I work with mosques and they distribute emergencies cash zakat grants on site. I work with volunteers that we have a gentleman with the Make America Great hat over there. It actually says NZF, but it's a red hat. He has a small community in Huntingdon and they got the youngsters to do a survey of who's in need and they circulated wealth. It's a community project. Now, one thing about the Sharia, which I'm going to start using more because it's so villainized in today's discourse, it's not a system of controlling other people. It's a system of encouraging all faith communities to self-organize and thrive. The Sharia is the only ancient code which allowed every Christian group and every Jewish group and every group to self-organize and self-judge and self-tax in a safe way. So what do Muslims stand for? What do Sharia-minded Muslims stand for? It's the duty of faith communities to self-organize and to allow faith to be celebrated in every community. Because faith is the only clear message bearer of the message this country needs, is that every problem of welfare is your problem. And you have to take charge of your neighbors. And the last thing I will say on this, you all will be aware of this social media thing that happened a month ago, of a lady that was calling mosques and churches for baby formula. That created such a movement of discussion online because people are human beings who just want to be touched. It's not very complicated. If this mosque learns, the mosque we're sitting in, just as a duty of zakat, how to coordinate and organize welfare, it will have the basic systems of helping all of its neighbors. And the mosques I work with have started doing that. We gave them a zakat system to organize emergency cash grants, and they said it's such a good system, they just added non-zakat wealth and invited others from the local authority. We can transform this country just by activating our community networks, our faith centers, for coordinating our community and being hubs of welfare for our wider community, and by partnering with anyone who wants to partner to catch those who are left behind. It's a very simple formula, and I believe it completely works. I'll just stop my current comment here. Thank you.
MashaAllah. Thank you so much. Off the back of that, I have a quick story to share. I was living in Manchester several years ago. It was Ramadan. And my family and I were visiting a family in abject poverty. The father was ill and on the brink of death, and he couldn't support his family, and they hadn't anything to break their iftar with that day. He actually suggested, let me go to the masjid just on the corner of this street. I know they're having a big iftar, easy for me to bring some food back before we can do the shopping, because, you know, it's that time of night. He went to the corner, he went to the masjid, he came back 15 minutes later, he had nothing. I said, listen, what happened? He said he went to the imam and he said, listen, disabled father, hungry family, 10 doors down. Can we just take some food that you've got for iftar? He said, do I look like a takeaway to you? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. I'm telling you the truth. And then he pushed again, and he said, well, get them to come here. He said, the father cannot move. He's in bed very sick. He said, can the girls move? Get them to move. It's like, so you won't send any food for them. He said, no, they have to come and sit in this mosque and eat. Now, we don't want to revel in these kind of stories, but we do want to begin rectifying them. And that is inexcusable. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask our Imam Ashraf, I wonder about our issues within our community and raising ourselves up in order to be of service to others.
Bismillah wa salatu salam ala Rasulullah. Just to add something to what Dr. Suhail mentioned, which I think is very important. The collective kind of mindset. This collective mindset, you find it's within the framework of Islamic law, the framework of Islamic spirituality. And this is something which you will also find is within the, if you would like to call it, framework of Islamic philosophy. So collectivism over individualism. And it's very important that we understand this, because we are living within a society which has and which does condition us to be individualistic. And so sometimes the clash that we find between Islam and the Western lifestyle, if you like, is simply a clash between these two things. And to give you an example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاتٌ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, you have in capital punishment life for those of you that think, for those of you that think, for those of you that intellectualize. And a person may ask, how is it that there is life in capital punishment? How is that the case? The case is that you put the collective over the individual. An individual has committed a heinous crime, and therefore the individual faces the consequences of that heinous crime, which prevents others from following the same path, and also removes the issues of within the hearts of the society. Whereas today, if you look at what's happening in the Western world, the perpetrator is put over the victim. Many times you find that the law is not even established for the sake of the victim. Where you find, for example, tax money is being spent to protect an individual and to look after an individual in prison who has committed a heinous crime, and that person then comes out after a few years. And what happens to the victim? There's no consideration. Why? Because individual over the collective. Same in the family. Families are breaking down. Why? Individuals over the collective. The mother and father, they think about themselves, and the sacrifice, the children. I don't love him anymore, I want to go my own way. I don't love her anymore, I want to go my own way. What about the children? No, I deserve to live a happy life. Islam does not teach this. Islam teaches responsibility and collective over individual. And so it's very, very important from a masjid perspective and from an individual perspective. I'm driving and I want to park. I want to take a sharp right. I don't think about the people behind me. I don't think about the people in front of me. Why? Because I'm individualistic. But collective, I think about others before I think about myself. And just to quickly go back to the question, which I forgot, Dr. Laura, my apologies.
It was to do with Imam Ashraf saying that how do we improve our community in order to raise others up?
So what I would say that just going back to the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, again, the first thing that the Prophet ﷺ carried out when he arrived at Medina, we all know, is what? Is number one, to bridge between the Muhajirin and the Ansar. Number two, to build a masjid. And the masjid is not simply a place of prayer. The fuqaha, the scholars of Islamic jurisprudence, they discuss the prayer and the obligation of praying in the masjid, in the congregation for the men. Why is it an obligation? It's not only an obligation of ritual consideration, but it's because it is conducive of building that collective. And from there, strategies are developed. From there, the pulse can be read, what's happening within our community, ties are built, etc. And so the starting place is the masjid. And the ending place is also the masjid. How so? When individuals come to the masjid, if the culture is developed correctly, if the issues are being addressed correctly, those members of that masjid then go outside, they address society, and they bring other members of society back to the masjid. And so it's the start and it's the end. And so to address the issues and to raise the standards, We have to address the masajid and raise the standards of the masajid. To be blunt, incompetence of leadership. We have to address an incompetence of leadership. And when we address the incompetence of leadership, then this will trickle down onto the congregation. And the congregation raise the ceiling by raising the floor. If you raise the floor, then you can reach a higher ceiling. But if you're looking at the ceiling and you have no floor to stand on, you're not going to get very far at all.
So one more comment from each of our panelists, and then I will be throwing for questions to you. So please formulate your questions, send them by QR code. We're so techie. Okay, we've talked about raising the floor, Paul. Have we fallen into a low state of imagination about what we as the Muslims can do in this country? Have we got stuck with, well, we can pray and we've got our mosques, now shush? Is that where we're at the moment? And what are we lacking in political fortitude and confidence?
Well, when you introduced us, you mentioned that we can give our expert opinion. I do want to stress I'm absolutely not an expert. My fellow panelists they've got the credentials. I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy who's just been invited to give a talk. So I don't have answers. But as a relative newcomer to the Muslim community, all I can say as an outsider, less of an outsider now, but just how gobsmacked and impressed I am that the way, when I've been to places like Birmingham and Manchester and Liverpool in the last year, the Muslim communities I've seen have a sense of cohesiveness and a sense of commitment. They practice their faith, particularly younger generations. With each succeeding generation, it seems that people are becoming more practicing, more committed to the faith, during Ramadan, praying 5 times a day, and so on. Zakat, participating responsibly in the community. It's extraordinary what's going on, actually. And this is a relatively recent incomer into this country. So I'm actually quite optimistic in some ways, actually, about what's happening, and impressed. I'm not trying to be complacent. I'm just saying that there is a lot that is genuinely impressive. And people from other countries, like the States, when they come here, are also impressed. They see a sense of community here, which they don't necessarily see in many Muslim communities in the US, for very different reasons, perhaps. So I just want to establish that. On the other extreme, I just want to say, and no one's saying this, and I can understand why no one's saying this, and I don't want to say it, but it is the case that there is chatter online. Even there's a senior academic, Professor of War Studies, no less, at King's College in London, who are talking actively. I don't want to say this, but if we don't say it, they're actively talking about the possibility of civil war in Britain. Actually, I don't know if you've heard this chatter that's going on. Now, I don't think it's at all probable, because I just don't see it. I don't see a massive social, civil dislocation taking place. But the fact that some people, this guy at King's College is a very senior academic. King's College has connections with the UK military. It's not just some random place. The fact that he's allowed to talk like this on YouTube channels, at interviews and producing papers, and allowed to use this language, shows that he's been given permission by the powers that be to talk about the possibilities of civil war in the UK. And of course, Muslims feature prominently as one side of this equation. You can imagine. I don't think it's likely, but I just want to say that it's now on the agenda, even if it's right on the margins, and we need to be aware of it. Yeah. Just aware of it. Not to get panicked, but there is a growing sense in some quarters and even some mainstream figures that are talking in this language. And the civil war involves us. But I don't think it's likely to happen. But we must remember Northern Ireland, we must remember former Yugoslavia. There are historical precedents, that's all I'm saying. But that's all. Sorry to have to mention that.
No. I think it's very, very important, because everything that a lot of what we're seeing right now was fringe thought a few years ago.
Exactly.
The kind of who'd have thought Tommy Robinson was a hero to hundreds of thousands of Brits when he's just a grifter and a criminal, and yet he can now rouse hundreds of thousands of people and be featured across mainstream media organisations as if he's a serious person. Exactly. So what starts as a whisper does have a bleed. How do we, Dr. Sahel, how do we stay positive with this? How do we move forward with showing people that our presence is actually important here? Perhaps we are the means, in fact, we are the means of barakah for this land. but we can't speak in that language. How do we speak the language of those we wish to help, not hate?
Thank you very much. Just to return to the metaphor that I'm trying to stick to today, which is about returning back to our sacred law and understanding its communal impetus, I want to remind everybody that when the Prophet passed, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from this world, he didn't instruct the companions to distribute leaflets or to make videos or to give lots of traveling lectures. What he did instruct was that the way of communal living that he established in Medina is that they ordered their societies like that in other places. So when the Muslims went to Iraq, there was never ever an imposition of this whole idea of Sharia is to impose. It's an absolute lie. There was never an attempt to impose anything. People were told, follow what you believe, follow your belief. Go to your Jewish temple if you have a dispute. Go there, go there. And Sayyidina Umar told the Muslims, build your own town. So Muslims they just built something new in the corner in Iraq. They built a settlement in Kufa and a settlement in Basra. So the Muslims were a minority where they governed under the companions and afterwards for centuries. There was no forced conversion, there was no imposed Sharia. What happened that those lands, Iraq, Iran, Egypt, Syria, what happened that those lands that were the absolute heartlands of Christianity and other faiths, that they've become to this day the heartlands of Islam. And there was no forced conversion and there was no imposition. What happened? It's because the Sharia is a code to order your communities in a way that works for its members. You build a house that's warm and people want to come. And you respect them. And you help them. And you serve them. And you never stop them. When the Muslims were allowed in the Quran the first time to fight back and defend themselves, Allah said, you have to do this, otherwise churches, monasteries, temples and mosques would be destroyed. And so right from the beginning, the Prophet is the custodian of all faith communities by the sacred law. And so I call this civilizational da'wah. You organize your zakat, you make spaces like mosques, you create spaces for free trade, which the Prophet also established, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You create spaces for communal arbitration. You honor and protect the family. And you create place-based leadership. So wherever we are, so my message to everyone here is, think of your place. I'm not from South Woodford. I don't know how you're going to... I'm from Southwest London, but I might as well have come to Manchester because it feels so far away. But I don't know if you call yourself East London, North East London, how your identity forms in your psyche. But think of a place. Think of all the Muslim centers and schools in that place. How do we bring them together? How do we create a central cooperation? Your mission doesn't stop with this mosque. This mosque is part of a solution for the place. That's the way we have to think. Your youth project isn't just yours. How can it work with other youth projects for a better solution in place? I call this our responsibility to build a house and home that works. As we do that, what's the language? The question was what language? And I'll just speak in the tone of civilizational da'wah. The language is offering the warmth of your home. This country, its majority of its people are being left behind. If we can come together and organize our welfare, and we offer welfare services to our neighbors, that's all that's required. I really think so. What Paul said, even if the drums of war get beaten by some people, they'll say, yeah, Muslims are awful, but not my mosque, and not that center, and not this place, because they look after me. It's just, you become a part of that. And so Muslims are the most generous people of this country, but we've forgotten the right of the neighbor. That's all I want us to think of.
About a year ago, I was in Birmingham giving a talk in a masjid. So I was in the middle of the bin strike, and a sister said to me, you know what, our roads stink, everything smells, the rats are out of control. Do you remember that? And the council is going broke. You know, what should we do? So I stood up and I said, look, guys, everybody has an Uncle G with a van, right? If the Muslims in Birmingham could go street by street, first we clean up our own areas and then we clean up Birmingham. It never happened as far as I know. Now that kind of civic behavior would make it very hard for a Tommy Robinson to tell everybody to hate us when they're like, but Birmingham's lovely and clean. When you visit your family in Birmingham, let us reflect. Is it the cleanest place? And so, final comment from you, Imam Ashraf, on how to make our mosque centres. Should they be centres that people can come to, or are they just for the Muslims? Please pick up on Dr. Sahel's point.
Bismillah, so the topic that I did want to address, and before doing so, just to remind everyone of what took place in Latimer, in West London a few years ago, when the Grenfell Tower burnt. There were non-Muslims giving interviews, and they were thanking and praising the Muslims for waking them up and for tending to them, and so on and so forth. And just to kind of reiterate the point that was being made by Sister Lauren, that we should not be worried or concerned about the media, whether far right or left or whatever it might be. We should not be concerned about individuals like Tommy Robinson. Why? Because the work should speak for itself. If we were doing our jobs, we wouldn't really have to care about individuals such as Tommy Robinson. They wouldn't have the space. But the fact that his message is resonating with some individuals is proof that we are not doing what we should be doing as Muslims. And so should the masajid, should the mosque be a place which is open to non-Muslims? If we really think about it, non-Muslims should have the priority over Muslims in our mosques. In a community where we are a minority and we want to bring guidance to others, we should be thinking about non-Muslims before we think about the Muslims. It's not to say that we shouldn't give space to Muslims, of course we should. But the Muslims, generally speaking, will come to the masjid. Generally speaking, of course, there are a large amount. They need some work, but the non-Muslim should be our primary target audience. Why? Because our responsibility here is to bring guidance to everyone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, rahmatan lil alameen, a mercy to mankind, which kind of is a door for me to talk about the masajid. Gold, when you're selling gold, you don't need to really sell it, you just need to package it. If a person realizes what you're selling is gold, they will buy it. You don't need to show the value of gold. The value of gold is pretty much known, but you have to worry about the packaging. You have to worry about the shop front. If it looks the part, people will trust the product. Likewise, if we think about Islam is gold. It doesn't need to be sold. People just need to see what it is. People need to feel what it is. People need to have the opportunity to meet Islam. That's where we have to provide that opportunity. So our masajid are like, forgive me for comparing Islam to a product, but our masajid are like shop fronts. And a shop front needs to be culturally representative. A person in the UK, when they enter into the masjid, should not feel that they are entering into an ethnic club. It should not be a club for Pakistanis or Bengalis or Somalis or Arabs or whatever you would like to add to that sentence. It should be a place of Islam, a place of faith. Of course, you are going to have individuals from those ethnic communities. Why? Because alhamdulillah, those ethnic communities are Muslim, generally speaking. But it should be representative of the culture of the land. If I were to ask you all a question, and be honest, don't shout out, of course, unless you really like to, but if you would like Islam to spread in a continent, the leaders of Islam in that continent should look like and sound like and represent who? The people of that continent, the people of that land. If we would like Islam to spread in any region of the world, you need it to be represented by the people of that region. Unfortunately, we stop this process from taking place. And we also try to culturalize those who do accept Islam when they come into the deen. Alhamdulillah, we're starting to move away from this, but we try to culturalize them and give them a culture which is not the culture of Islam. And I believe it was mentioned earlier that Paul, shall I say brother, shall I say ustad, shall I say so Paul mentioned earlier that Islam is universal. Yeah, Islam is universal. It fits into any shape, any container that you place it into, Islam fits. You look at the hijab, for example. You go to Africa, you go to the subcontinent, you go to the Middle East, you go to parts of Europe. The hijab looks different, but it fits the framework of Islam. which shows you the universality of Islam. We have to separate it from ethnic culture. And I understand why this happens, because we want to protect Islam, so we surround it. But Islam will protect itself. Islam dictates and refines culture. So you don't need to worry about that. So our masajid, number one, the culture. We have to address the culture. Language and sensitivity to the culture of the locality, as Dr. Suhail mentioned, the locality. Number two, character. When someone enters into the masjid, who greets them and who meets them? I've been to masajid where individuals have said, when after someone has taken their shahada in the masjid, individuals have said, we don't want this to happen again in this mosque. Where a person from a background other than the background of the collective is made to feel uncomfortable and out of place. And it might even just be the imam talking in a language after salah that is not the language of the land. This makes it feel like it's not for me. And the reality is, it has been felt by English people, by other than English people, when they say Islam is a religion for Pakistanis. When an English person becomes Muslim, they're told, oh, you're a Pakistani lover. Why? Because Islam has been made to feel like it belongs to an ethnic community. So we have to address this issue. So the character, addressing the ills within our communities. If abuse is taking place from an individual that represents the Muslim community, we should be the first to stand up. The Daily Mail should not have to do that job for us. On our manabir, we should be saying, this is unacceptable, this is a heinous crime, this is disgusting, and this is punishable by X, Y, and Z in Islam. We have to speak out. Drug dealers, pimps, gambling dens, all of these things have to be tackled. It's not enough for us to say we have the light, but yet the people of our community are selling the darkness. It's contradictory. And just to kind of, because I'm trying to be as brief as possible, build up a culture of resilience, not victimization. Yes, we are going to be targeted. Yes, we are going to be attacked. Yes, we are going to be subjected to whatever we don't want to be subjected to if we are bringing Islam to the people. But this is the path of da'wah. The Prophet ﷺ, look what he went through. One of the companions came to the Prophet ﷺ and complained. This individual had scars on his entire body because he was being burnt by the person who at that time was his mistress. He was a slave, and he was a freed slave, but he was complaining, look what's happening, Ya Rasulullah, are we not going to make dua for victory? The Prophet ﷺ said, you are a hasty people. But we victimize ourselves, The term Islamophobia has its place politically, but for us it should be, no, this is the path. And we're willing to forbear. Why? For the guidance of others. And just to kind of conclude, on the masjid, it should be open to all, meaning all ethnic communities feel welcome, and it's also open to all theologically, jurisprudentially and spiritually. A person should not come to the masjid and feel this is a Salafi masjid, this is a Deobandi masjid, this is a Ash'ari or Athari, whatever you want, Hanafi, Shafi'i. No, it should be a masjid, a house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Pray as you are and connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as you are, regardless of your theological inclination, your fiqhi inclination, even something that some may find controversial, even if a person comes to the masjid to pray and they are from a community which would not be accepted by Ahlul Sunnah. We should accept them, welcome them, greet them, and let them feel that they are part of the community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide. إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Just create the environment, and Allah is the one who is responsible for guidance.